Hi, I'm Alexander Maxim from PHP and IO. Today we will continue our series about PHP. We will check the string methods. This is the second part. We will check the Bin2Hex method, the count cars method, the explode method, and the Hex2Bin method. Let's start with the Bin2Hex method. What's the Bin2Hex method? This function or this method converts the binary representation data to hexadecimal representation. The Bin2Hex function returns a text string encoded in ASCII that contains hexadecimal representation of the string parameter. It has the string as parameter and it returns the hexadecimal representation of the entered text string. Let's take an example to understand how it works. Firstly, we'll add a comment. Bin2Hex method. Then I will use the echo with each three elements to print the title Bin2Hex method. After that, I will create a string str. PHP is the best. Then I will use another variable Bin2Hex. Inside this variable, I will use the method Bin2Hex and I will pass the string as parameter. So now the Bin2Hex variable contains the hexadecimal representation of this string. Then I will use echo again to print the PHP, or let's see, str. I will concatenate it with this sentence in hex equals to now Bin2Hex. Let's reload and see our result. So PHP is the best in hexadecimal representation is this number. So this sentence or this string or this representation in hexadecimal is this string in binary data. Also, for example, I will use the number 65 in hexadecimal is let's concatenate it with the Hex2Bin, and I will use the number 65 and see the results. So I will also copy and paste this to see the difference between the hexadecimal representation and the ASCII code. So I will use the car method. Let's reload and see. So I will firstly concatenate it with the BR. Then we have the number 65 in hexadecimal is the letter small e, and the number 65 in ASCII is the small or is the capital A. Let's see how it works. So we have our method which is Bin2Hex, so we will convert the binary data to a hexadecimal representation. It has the string as parameter. This is our string. PHP is the best. When we move or when we pass this string to the Bin2Hex method, we will get this result. Why we will get this result? We have a table of characters in ASCII and in hexadecimal representation. For example, the letter small e, because we have the letter small e here, is in the hexadecimal representation the code is 69. Let's search inside our hexadecimal representation if we have 69. So we have here the number 69. So it's the representation of the letter small e. We have also, for example, the letter small e. The letter small e here is 65. Let's see, and here we have 65. So 65 in hexadecimal representation is the representation of the small e in binary data. So the number 65 in hexadecimal, because there is a difference between the hexadecimal representation and the code ASCII. So 65 in hexadecimal is the letter E, and the number 65 in ASCII is the letter capital A. After the Bin2Hex method, we have the count cars method. Let's see what's the count cars method. This method or this function returns information about the characters in the text string. The function returns the number of iterations for each byte value from value 0 to 255 in a text string in different ways. It has the string as parameter and it returns 4 results depending on the number that you give as parameter. Let's see an example to understand the count cars method. Always we will use the title and the comments to organize our code here. I will use the count cars method. I copy, paste it in the title. Then I will use the pre-tag because the count cars method returns an array. So we will use the pre to organize our array, to be clear. Then I will use each 3 or each 5 elements to print another title, count cars 0. What it means? So count cars 0 is when we pass the number 0 to the count cars because it has 2 parameters. So I will use print r because it returns an array. I will use the count cars method. I will pass the string which is str and the number 0. I will copy and paste the same here, and I will change from 0 to 4 because we have 5 numbers from 0 to 4, and here number 1, number 2, 3 and 4, and it returns different results. Let's reload and see the results. So look at here, the count cars 0, it returns an array like it, and the count cars 1, it returns this array, count cars 2 this array, and count cars 3 it returns this string, count cars 4 returns these letters. Let's see how it works. So when the number is 0, an array with the ASCII value as key and number of occurrences as values or as value. Let's see when the number is equals to 0. When the number equals to 0, so for example here the 32 is the space. The space appears 4 times in our string. Let's see. So we have PHP 1, 2, 3 and 4. Great. For example 72. 72 is this sign. It appears just 1 time, and here we have just 1 time. So when the number is 0, an array with the ASCII value as key and number of occurrences as value. When the number is 1, an array with the ASCII value as key and number of occurrences as value, only list occurrences greater than 0. So all the occurrences that equals to 0 will be ignored. Let's see when the number is 1. We have the space appears 4 times, 1 time, 1 time, etc. So we have no value appears 0. and this is the result. When the number is equals to 2, an array with the ASCII value as key and number of occurrences as value, only list occurrences equals to 0 are listed. So all these numbers or all these elements will be ignored in the number 2, sorry. So we have just the occurrences equals to 0. When the number is 3, a string with all different characters used. So we have this sign, the H, the P, B, E. Because we have 2P, we have here just the letter capital P, etc. When the number equals to 4, a string with all the unused characters. So we haven't used the numbers because we have just PHP is the best. We haven't used the, for example, the addition sign, this signs, the greater, the equals, etc. All this sign, we haven't used all this sign in our string. After the count cars method, we have the explode method. What's the explode method? This function or this method divides a text string into sections and returns it as an array. The explode function returns an array of text strings. Each text string is a segmentation of the total text string by dividing it as the delimiter string. It has 3 parameters. The first is the delimiter, the string selector, which is the type in which the text string will be divided, and the second is the string, the entered text string to segment, and the third one is the limit. If the parameter value is positive, the returned array will contain elements with a limit number, with the last elements in the array containing the rest of the text string. If the parameter value is negative, the returned array will contain all text string characters except another limit element. This is the explode method. Let's see an example to understand the explode method. So always we will copy and paste the comment and the title, and we have now explode method. I will use print r because it returns another array. I will use the explode method. I will pass the delimiter, which is the space in our case here, and I will use the str as the string, and we have an array with these elements. Why we get this result? PHP is the best. Let's see how it works. So this is our method explode, the separator or delimiter and the string. Our string is PHP is the best. So when we pass this string to the explode method and the delimiter is the space, it will copy or it will cut the string by the space. So we have PHP, we have no space, and here we have space. So it will take this element and make it as the first element in our new array. And we have is, and we have another space here. It will cut this part and make it as second element. And we have and we have also another space. It will copy or it will copy this element and make it as third element in our array, and etc. When we use, this is our array, when we use the print r method, we will get this result as you see here. We will get PHP because it's the first element. After PHP we will get a space, and for that the explode method cuts the string and copy this first element and make it as first element in our array. After the explode method we have the Hex2Bin method. What's the Hex2Bin method? This function decodes the hexadecimal encoding of the binary representation strings. Note that the Hex2Bin function does not convert the hexadecimal representation of numbers to binary representation, but use the base convert function to perform such a transformation. It has the data as parameter and it returns the binary representation of the entered data, or false value in a case of failure. The Hex2Bin function causes the error a warning if the length of the text string is odd or has a hexadecimal representation. Let's take an example to understand this function or this method. So we have firstly we have Bin2Hex, and now the contrary is Hex2Bin function or method. And now I will firstly print our str or our Bin2Hex. I will concatenate it with br, then I will use echo and I will use Hex2Bin, and I will pass our Bin2Hex variable as parameter. Let's reload and see the results. So we have, this is the representation that we get using the Bin2Hex method, and when we convert it we will get this result. So let's see how it works. So we have Hex2Bin, it accepts, or we must pass an hexadecimal representation or code. This is our hexadecimal representation in the Bin2Hex variable that I pass it to this function, and this is the result. It will give us the PHP is the best. Always we have the number here in hexadecimal and in ASCII as the Bin2Hex. The Hex2Bin method converts the hexadecimal representation to binary data, and the Bin2Hex is the contrary of the Hex2Bin, and this is the result. So we have this this representation equals to this string here. So today you have learned the Bin2Hex method, the count cars, explode, and the Hex2Bin method. Thank you for your watching.